Nothing dramatic happens at 30. That's the problem. You don't wake up weaker. You don't suddenly lose your lifts. There's no moment where your body announces it's done being young. And because nothing obvious changes, most people assume nothing has changed at all. But something has. The gym just stopped giving you free refunds. In your 20s, you could sleep badly, train randomly, eat whatever showed up, skip warm-ups, and still walk out feeling fine. Progress came because recovery was generous and novelty did most of the heavy lifting. You didn't need a plan. You just needed to show up and try hard. The gym forgave almost everything. After 30, that silent generosity starts disappearing. Not all at once. Not in ways you'd notice on any single day. But over months, then years, the math changes. Recovery takes longer. Small mistakes compound. Minor tweaks don't vanish overnight. And the things you used to ignore, sleep, stress, warm-ups, consistency, start determining whether you progress or just survive. This isn't about decline. It's about the rules changing without anyone telling you. The people who thrive training after 30 aren't genetically gifted or tougher than everyone else. They just figured out what shifted and adjusted before it cost them years. The ones who struggle, they keep training like they're 24, wondering why the results stopped coming and the ache started staying. How the gym changes after 30, nobody warns you. Not because it's a secret, but because the changes are too quiet to notice until you're already behind. The goal here isn't to scare you. It's to give you the awareness most people only get through years of frustration, wasted effort, and preventable setbacks. We're going to walk through what actually shifts in your physiology, your recovery, your psychology, your schedule, and the way progress actually works once the easy years are behind you. This is general training information, not medical advice. If something feels off, talk to a professional. But if you want to understand why the gym feels different now and what to do about it, this is where we start. Because once you see it clearly, training after 30 doesn't have to feel like fighting your own body. It just requires a different kind of intelligence. Recovery stops being automatic. You do the same leg day you did at 24. Same exercises, same weights, same effort. But instead of bouncing back in a day or two, the soreness follows you around for 3 or 4 days like it has nowhere else to be. This is usually the first sign. Not that you're old, but that recovery has stopped being automatic. In your 20s, your body handled the cleanup in the background. Sleep was flexible. Stress was recoverable. Nutrition mistakes got absorbed without much consequence. The system had margin, and you never had to think about it. After 30, that margin shrinks. Sleep quality starts matching more than sleep quantity. Chronic stress doesn't just make you tired. It blunts the anabolic signals your muscles need to rebuild. One bad night might not wreck you, but a bad week of sleep starts showing up in your joints, your bar speed, and your patience. Research suggests that even a single night of total sleep deprivation can reduce muscle protein synthesis by roughly 18%. Stack a few rough nights together and you're not just tired, you're training with a recovery system running at half capacity. Most people misread this completely. They think they're getting old. But usually it's not age itself. It's less sleep consistency, more background stress, less structured nutrition, and less incidental movement throughout the day. The body hasn't failed. The inputs just matter now. The cost of ignoring this is a slow spiral. Some people compensate by training less hard, which leads to stagnation. Others push harder, thinking effort will fix everything, and dig themselves into a fatigue hole they can't climb out of. Either way, they end up frustrated and confused. The reframe is simple. Recovery after 30 becomes something you train on purpose. It's not passive anymore. Sleep, stress management, and nutrition aren't extras. They're part of the program. The people who figure this out early don't just feel better. They actually make progress while everyone else wonders why showing up isn't enough anymore. Warm UPS go from optional to mandatory. You used to walk into the gym, throw some plates on the bar, and feel fine by the second set. Maybe a little stiff, but nothing that stopped you. The body cooperated without negotiation. After 30, your first working set starts feeling like your joints are holding a committee meeting. Shoulders need convincing. Hips ask questions. Knees remind you they exist. This isn't damage. It's physics. Tissue temperature matters. Joint lubrication takes time to distribute. Your nervous system needs a ramp-up period to coordinate movement efficiently. And tendons, which don't get the same blood flow as muscles, respond to load differently when they're cold. The forgiveness that let you skip the on-ramp in your 20s just isn't there anymore. Most people misread this as permanent stiffness. They assume their body is breaking down, but often it's just that they skipped the warm-up they never needed before. The stiffness isn't a symptom of aging. It's a symptom of walking in cold and expecting everything to work immediately. The cost is subtle but real. Crankier sessions, worse technique on early sets. More of those little tweaks that don't hurt enough to stop you, but don't fully heal either. Over time, you start dreading the gym because the first 15 minutes always feel bad. And that dread compounds. The reframe. Warm-up isn't extra anymore. It's the price of entry. 5 to 10 minutes of movement prep isn't wasted time. It's what makes the rest of the session actually work. The people who resist this end up losing more time to nagging issues than they ever would have spent warming up properly. Injuries become sticky, not dramatic. In your 20s, you tweak something and it would disappear in a week. Maybe 2. You forget it ever happened. The body handle repairs quickly, quietly, and completely. After 30, that tiny shoulder thing doesn't vanish. It becomes a background character. Not bad enough to stop training. Not good enough to ignore. Just there, showing up during certain movements, reminding you it exists, never fully resolving. This is one of the most frustrating shifts in fitness over 30. Injuries stop being dramatic events and start being sticky annoyances. The reason comes down to connective tissue. Tendons and ligaments don't adapt as quickly as muscles. Collagen turnover slows. The structures that hold you together become more sensitive to how you load them, not just how much, but how consistently. Most people misinterpret this as fragility. They assume their body is falling apart. But more often, it's not that they're broken. It's that they're still training like a 22-year-old with a 35-year-old calendar. The load isn't the problem. The mismatch between load, recovery, and tissue readiness is. The cost of ignoring this is either fear or recklessness. Some people stop training entirely because they're convinced they're damaged. Others push through everything, collecting a growing list of minor issues that eventually force a longer break than any single injury would have. Both paths lead to inconsistency, and inconsistency is the real killer of progress after 30. The reframe, it's not fragility, it's slower refunds. Your body still adapts. It just doesn't hand out free passes anymore. The people who learn to manage load intelligently, backing off when something flares, progressing when it settles, stay in the game longer than the ones who treat every tweak as either catastrophe or nothing. Strength can still rise, but not recklessly. PR attempts used to be a vibe. You felt good. The weight moved, you went for it. Maybe you hit it, maybe you didn't. But either way, you recover and try again next week. After 30, PR attempts start having consequences. Not because you're weaker, but because your system doesn't absorb chaos the same way. Your nervous system and connective tissues respond differently to maximal efforts when recovery is tighter and life stress is higher. A heavy single that would have been forgotten in 3 days at 25 might leave your joints irritated for 2 weeks at 35. The strength is still there. The ability to express it recklessly is not. Most people misread this as decline. They think they can't go heavy anymore. But that's not true. You can still build strength after 30. You can still hit personal records. You just can't do it emotionally and impulsively. Planned intensity works. Random intensity cost. The cost of ignoring this is a cycle of chronic flare-ups and inconsistent training blocks. You go hard when you feel good. Pay for it for weeks. Finally feel better, go hard again, and repeat. Progress stalls not because you're not trying, but because you keep interrupting your own momentum. The reframe. The strongest lifters over 30 are boring. They plan their heavy days. They earn their maxes through consistent progression, not emotional decisions. Strength training over 30 still works. It just requires patience and structure instead of adrenaline and hope. Muscle loss isn't the problem. Inactivity is. 2 weeks off used to be nothing. You come back, feel a little rusty, and be back to normal within a session or 2. After 30, 2 weeks off feels like you lost something. Not dramatically, but enough to notice. The weights feel heavier. The coordination feels off. The edge, it seems dulled. This is where people start worrying about sarcopenia, the gradual loss of muscle mass that comes with aging. And yes, it's real, but here's what most people miss. Sarcopenia is slow. It happens over years, not weeks. What feels like rapid decline after a short break isn't aging. It's the compounding cost of inconsistency. The research is clear. Older adults can still build muscle. Resistance training produces hypertrophy at almost any age. The issue isn't that your body stops responding. It's that it stops tolerating neglect. In your 20s, you could disappear for a month and come back without much penalty. After 30, gaps matter more. Each missed week costs a little more to recover from, and those costs add up. Most people misinterpret this as inevitable decline. They assume they need extreme training to fight aging, but usually they just need consistency. Showing up 3 times a week, every week, beats showing up 6 times a week for 2 months and then vanishing. The cost of getting this wrong is a cycle of overcompensation and dropout. People train too hard when they're motivated, burn out, disappear, feel worse, and repeat. The muscle they're worried about losing gets lost not to age, but to absence. The reframe: you don't fight aging, you fight neglect. Muscle after 30 stays if you keep showing up. The people who maintain their strength into their 40s, 50s, and beyond aren't doing anything special. They just never stopped. Your nervous system gets pickier. You can still lift heavy after 30. That's not the issue. The issue is that your spark isn't infinite anymore. In your 20s, you could stack maximal sets, push through fatigue, and recover by Tuesday. Your nervous system had bandwidth to spare. After 30, that bandwidth tightens. Too many all-out efforts in a week or even session, and you start feeling flat. The weights that move fast last week feel glued to the floor. Your coordination slips. Your motivation craters. This isn't weakness. It's central fatigue. Your nervous system's ability to repeatedly generate peak output depends on recovery, sleep, and overall stress load. When those inputs degrade, as they often do with age, career demands, and life complexity, your capacity for high-intensity work shrinks. Most people misread this as needing more stimulation. They reach for stronger pre-workout. They add more sets. They chase the feeling of going all out because that's what training felt like when it worked. But sometimes the answer is fewer maximal efforts, not more. The cost of ignoring this is a fatigue spiral. Intensity stays high, but quality drops. You're always training, but never actually recovering enough to improve. Injuries start sneaking in because your coordination degrades before your ambition does. The reframe: intensity becomes a spice after 30, not the whole meal. You still need it, but you need it strategically, not constantly. The lifters who stay strong long-term learn to use their peak efforts carefully, saving them for when they count and backing off when the tank is empty. Volume tolerance changes before strength does. You feel strong. The weights move well, so you add one more set. Why not? You can handle it. Then your elbows start complaining, or your lower back tightens up in a way it didn't before, or you wake up the next day feeling like you got hit by something. This is one of the sneakier shifts in gym after 30. Your volume tolerance can drop before your strength does. You're still capable of lifting the same weights, but your ability to recover from accumulated work decreases. Connective tissues start complaining before muscles do. Joints send signals you never use again. The reason ties back to recovery constraints and tissue adaptation rates. When sleep is worse, stress is higher, and life demands more, your capacity to absorb training volume shrinks. The same program that worked at 28 might be too much at 34. Not because you're weaker, but because the recovery math changed. Most people misinterpret this as their program failing. They think the exercise has stopped working, so they switch to something new. But often, the issue isn't the movements, it's the volume to recovery ratio. Doing slightly less more consistently would have worked better than doing more and breaking down. The cost of getting this wrong is either quitting volume entirely and losing the stimulus you need, or doubling down and accumulating damage. Both paths lead to frustration and stall progress. The reframe: volume becomes precise after 30, not infinite. You can still train hard. You just have to be more honest about what you can actually recover from and adjust when the signals tell you it's too much. Ego starts costing more than it pays. There's a moment in almost every gym session after 30 where ego whispers something. Add more weight. Hit that old number. Show yourself you've still got it. Sometimes you do. The lift moves. You feel like your old self for a second. And then the next day or the next week, your body sends an invoice. A shoulder that won't settle. A back that locks up. A knee that didn't bother you yesterday, but suddenly has opinions. In your 20s, ego-driven training was mostly free. You could chase numbers for validation, push through warning signs, and recover without much consequence. The margin was wide enough to absorb bad decisions. After 30, that margin disappears. The physical cost of ego gets higher, while the psychological payoff stays the same. You're still chasing the feeling of being impressive, but now it comes with interest rates. Most people don't recognize this as ego. They frame it as discipline or toughness, or refusing to give up. But often, it's just comparison with their past selves, with other people in the gym, with an image of who they think they should be. And that comparison drives decisions that don't serve their actual progress. The cost is setbacks that didn't need to happen. One bad decision. Going too heavy on a day when everything fell off can sideline you for weeks. And those weeks add up. Over years, the person who trains smart ends up far ahead of the person who trains proud. The reframe: after 30, ego is the fastest way to get weaker. The lifters who keep progressing learn to separate their identity from the numbers on any given day. They train for accumulation, not applause. Consistency beats intensity for the first time. The best progress after 30 often comes from weeks that don't feel heroic. You show up, you do the work, you don't push to failure. You leave without a dramatic story. And somehow, over months, you're stronger than you were. This is an inversion that catches most people off guard. In your 20s, intensity drove results. Going hard, pushing limits, chasing soreness. That's what felt like training. After 30, that approach starts costing more than it delivers. The math is simple. Recovery budgets tighten. Missing entire weeks hurts more than missing a single rep. A moderate session you can repeat 4 times a week beats an intense session that takes 5 days to recover from. The boring, sustainable path outperforms the exciting, chaotic one. Most people misread this shift. They think if they're not destroyed, the workout didn't count. That mindset, forged in their 20s when it was mostly true, becomes expensive after 30. They chase exhaustion instead of adaptation, and wonder why they're always tired but never progressing. The cost is boom-bust cycles. Train hard for a few weeks, burn out, take time off, feel guilty, come back too hard, repeat. Progress becomes a jagged line instead of a steady climb. Years pass with minimal net improvement. The reframe: the new PR after 30 is repeating good sessions. Consistency compounds in ways that intensity can't. The people who figure this out stop measuring their training by how hard it felt and start measuring it by how many quality weeks they can string together. Mobility becomes a skill, not a stretch. You can't stretch your way into better squats if you never build strength in the positions you're trying to reach. This is the mobility trap after 30. People feel stiff, so they stretch more. They foam roll. They do yoga once a week. But nothing really changes because passive flexibility and active control are different things. And it's active control that determines what you can actually do under load. Mobility is control. It's the ability to access a range of motion and produce force there. That requires strength, coordination, and practice, not just tissue length. A tight hip flexor might loosen temporarily with stretching, but if you never train your hip in deep positions with resistance, the tightness comes right back because your nervous system doesn't trust that range. Most people over 30 misinterpret their stiffness as a stretching problem. They add more passive work and avoid the positions that feel hard. But avoidance makes it worse. The ranges you never load become the ranges you can never use. The cost of this mistake is a shrinking movement vocabulary. Over years, People lose access to positions they used to own, not because of age, but because they stop training those positions. They adapt to their limitations instead of addressing them. The reframe: range is earned by strength. Loaded movement in full ranges, done carefully, progressively, builds mobility that sticks. The people who stay mobile after 30 don't just stretch more. They train more positions with more intention. Time scarcity becomes the real limiter. You're not training less because you're lazy. You're training less because you have 45 minutes, not 2 hours. Your schedule shrunk while the demands on it grew. This is a reality of fitness. Over 30 for most people. Career pressure increases. Relationships deepen. Family obligations appear. Sleep becomes non-negotiable because without it, everything else falls apart. The gym gets whatever time is left, and often that's not much. The problem isn't motivation. It's logistics. And when people can't do their full workout, they often do nothing instead. The all-or-nothing mindset that worked in their 20s, when time was abundant, becomes a consistency killer after 30. Most people don't recognize time scarcity as the real limiter. They blame themselves for lacking discipline. But discipline isn't the issue. The issue is trying to fit a 2-hour program into a life that can only support 45 minutes. The mismatch guarantees failure. The cost is chronic inconsistency. Weeks get missed not because people don't care, but because they don't have a version of training that fits their actual life. They keep waiting for enough time that never comes. The reframe: after 30, minimum effective dose becomes a superpower. A short, dense session done consistently beats a long, perfect session done sporadically. The people who stay fit through their 30s and beyond learn to make 45 minutes work, because that's what they have. Motivation shifts from hype to identity. You stop training to look impressive and start training to not feel like you're slipping. This is the psychological shift most people don't see coming. In your 20s, motivation came from ambition, vanity, competition, or the simple thrill of progress. After 30, those drivers fade. The gym stops being exciting, but something else takes their place. Something quieter and more durable. You start noticing that you feel better on days you train. Your mood stabilizes. Your stress has somewhere to go. Your energy improves. The gym becomes less about building a body and more about maintaining a life. You train for function, sanity, and the version of yourself you want to be. Most people misread this transition as losing motivation. They think they're supposed to feel fired up, and when they don't, they assume something's wrong. They chase novelty, new programs, new gyms, new trends, hoping to recapture the excitement they used to feel. The cost of chasing hype is instability. People bounce between programs, never staying long enough for anything to work. They abandon routines the moment they stop feeling entertaining, and they never build a sustainable foundation that actually produces long-term results. The reframe: the mature version of motivation is commitment without fireworks. After 30, you don't train because it's thrilling. You train because it's part of who you are. That shift feels like loss at first, but it's actually the foundation of training that lasts for decades. Training becomes preventive, not just productive. You start caring about moving well tomorrow more than looking pumped today. This is a shift that separates short-term fitness from long-term durability. In your 20s, training was about building, adding muscle, gaining strength, improving performance. After 30, another dimension enters. You start training to protect. This isn't paranoia, it's recognition. Injuries become stickier. Recovery takes longer. The cost of damage increases, so the calculation changes. You start including movements not because they make you look better, but because they keep you from breaking down. You warm up properly. You train positions that prevent problems. You respect rest. Most people misread this as training like an old person. They see prehab work and mobility drills as admissions of weakness. They resist the shift because it feels like giving up on ambition. The cost of that resistance is eventually being forced into preventive training anyway, after an injury demands it. The difference is that proactive prevention keeps you training consistently, while reactive prevention happens during forced breaks. The reframe: longevity work is strength work with a future. You're not training scared. You're training smart. The people who stay strong into their 40s and beyond figured out that protecting tomorrow is part of building today. The gym stops being entertainment. At some point, the gym becomes something else. Not a circus, not a performance, not a place to be seen or to feel adrenaline. It becomes maintenance therapy, discipline, or sanity. This transition happens quietly. You stop needing novelty to show up. You stop chasing the feeling of being destroyed. You stop comparing your sessions to what other people post online. The gym becomes routine in the deepest sense, a non-negotiable part of how you stay functional. Most people misread this as the gym becoming boring. They remember when training was exciting and assume the flatness they feel now means something's wrong. They try to recapture the entertainment value by changing everything. New programs, new equipment, new goals. But the spark doesn't return. The cost of chasing entertainment is quitting when it fades. People leave the gym not because they physically can't do it, but because they expect it to feel like it used to. When it doesn't, they conclude they've lost something and walk away. To reframe, the gym after 30 is where you keep your life from shrinking. It's not supposed to be exciting every day. It's supposed to be stable. The ritual of showing up, doing the work, and leaving slightly better than you arrived. That's the point now. The people who understand this don't need motivation. They need routine. The gym after 30 isn't about decline. It's about refinement. Everything you relied on in your 20s, fast recovery, forgiveness for mistakes, progress without planning, quietly disappears. But something else shows up in its place. You become more aware of what actually works. You waste less time on things that don't. You start respecting the process instead of just chasing the outcome. The people who thrive training after 30 aren't tougher than everyone else. They're not genetically blessed. They just figured out the new rules before they paid too much for ignoring them. They adjusted their recovery. They accepted that warm-ups matter. They stopped letting ego make their decisions. They learned that consistency beats intensity, that mobility is trained, that 45 minutes done well is enough. Aging doesn't take your fitness. Ignoring the shifts does. And the irony is that once you make the adjustments, training often becomes more sustainable, more satisfying, and more connected to the rest of your life than it ever was before. So the question isn't whether you can still train hard. You can. The question is whether you're willing to train smart and let go of the way things used to work. If this changed how you think about training, consider subscribing. There's more to say about building a body that lasts.